There are villages still hidden in the folds of the mountains, places not marked on maps, where the air tastes of old ash and the rivers run red when the moon is full. In these forgotten corners of Asia, tradition is not memory, it is law. The dead are not buried, they are bargained with. Welcome to folk fear. A channel that dares to whisper what others seal behind silk and silence. Here we walk the cursed path, through ancestral pacts, ghost marriages, bloodline offerings, and rituals older than time itself. Every tale is rooted in a truth someone tried to forget. But folklore never dies, it just waits in the shadows to be believed again. And once you listen, it listens back. Tonight's story comes from the borderlands, a village choked in mist, cradled between jungles and forgotten shrines. It begins with grief, it ends with silence. When a daughter dies before her wedding, a family performs the forbidden, marrying her spirit to a sealed jar said to house a wandering soul. But the soul they awaken does not bring peace. It brings hunger, and it feeds on the one thing you cannot replace, your memory, one tooth at a time. This is the tale of the funerary doll that smiled with stolen mouths, of the jar that whispered in the dark, of betrayal that bound a village to the dead. This is the teeth collector of Mang Gui Hamlet. Mang Gui Hamlet had no gates, no signs to welcome strangers, just a dirt path that curled like a dying snake through the jungle, fading beneath moss and the scent of rotting leaves. No one stumbled upon Mang Gui by accident. If you came here, it was because someone whispered the name to you in a dream or a curse. The village sat cradled in a mist that never left. The sun rose and set, but light rarely touched the ground. The trees grew close, too close, knotted trunks bending inward like old men listening to secrets. Crows did not fly overhead. Dogs did not bark after dusk. And in Mang Gui, when a girl died before her wedding, no one said her name after dark. Ling was 17. Her face, once full of life, had been drained of color in just one night. Her mother swore it was sudden, a sickness of the heart, they said. Others whispered of a different cause. Some spoke of betrayal, but no one questioned too loudly. Mang Gui was a village that understood the cost of too many questions. She had been promised to a boy from the other side of the valley, a quiet boy named Duong, who carved talismans from banyan roots and left lotus blossoms at Ling's doorstep. The wedding was set for the 7th day of the 7th month, a date favored by lovers and spirits alike. But 5 days before her wedding veil was to be lowered, Ling was found cold, her body twisted in the lotus pond behind her house, her mouth open, her tongue black. They said she had been dreaming of something she couldn't wake from. Her father, Ong Yui, was not a man of emotion. His hands were thick with calluses from years of carving ancestral altars. But when they pulled Ling's body from the pond, he fell to his knees. Not from grief, but from fear. There was a story in his family, one he had never told Ling, a warning that came with their bloodline. If a daughter dies unmarried, her soul will wander, but if she is bound in death, she may bring others with her. It was Mai, Ling's best friend since childhood, who suggested a solution. Her voice was quiet, trembling with false kindness, as she handed Ling's grieving mother a folded silk bundle. Inside was a tattered scroll and an address. "There's a man, a Taoist, not from here. He performs weddings for the dead. It's not legal, but it brings peace. The scroll bore the faded seal of a forbidden sect, Bat Kwai Yin Hun, the 8 trigamans of yin marriage. Even speaking the name was considered unclean. But grief is louder than taboo. So on the 3rd night after Ling's death, her father followed the instructions. The house was sealed in red paper, mirrors were covered, candles were lit in bowls of black rice. A funerary altar was built, not for mourning, but for betrothal. The Taoist arrived before midnight. His robes were gray, stained with wax and ink. His face was hidden beneath a conical hat covered in red thread. He never looked directly at Ling's body. Instead, he looked at the empty chair beside her. "Do you have the vessel?" he asked. Her father hesitated. "What vessel?" The Taoist frowned. "No soul can marry the wind. The groom must be present, even if he no longer breathes." And then Mai stepped forward again. She held something wrapped in yellow cloth, tied with red string. It clinked when she handed it over. "I found this in the old shrine. It called to me," she whispered, not meeting anyone's eyes. The Taoist took it with both hands, reverent. He opened the cloth and revealed a ceramic jar, pale and cracked, sealed with melted wax around the lid. Strange symbols had been carved into the clay, teeth maybe, or claws. A faint hum seemed to vibrate from within. "This will do," the Taoist said. "He is bound, but willing." That night, beneath a sky with no stars, Ling was married. Her body was dressed in a red silk ao dai, her hair braided with incense threads. At midnight, the Taoist began to chant, low, guttural words that made the mirrors shiver beneath their cloth. He placed the sealed jar on the altar beside her and lit a candle atop its lid. Then he brought out the doll. It was no bigger than a baby, made of carved wood and dried lotus leaves, dressed in miniature wedding robes. Its face was blank, no eyes, no mouth, but something about its shape made Ling's mother gasp. It looked like her, too much like her. The Taoist pressed the doll against Ling's chest and placed the ceramic jar beside her heart. "Your daughter shall not wander," he said. "She will remember her love. She will not take another's name." The ceremony ended before dawn. The doll was placed on a new altar, its hands wrapped in red thread. The jar was stored in the ancestral room, its seal unbroken. And for a while, there was peace. No insects entered the house. The air smelled of rice and sandalwood. Ling's photo stopped falling from the wall. Her mother whispered prayers each night, brushing the doll's hair with a miniature comb. But then, the teeth began to fall. It started with Uncle Tien, the oldest man in the village. One morning he was found asleep in his chair, drooling blood, 2 molars missing. He remembered nothing, said he had dreamed of laughter. Then a child, then a woman, then the school teacher. All found with missing teeth. No sign of struggle, no break-ins, no animals, just gaps, bleeding gums, and vague memories of someone smiling. Mang Gui tried to dismiss it. "Coincidence," he muttered. "Old age, bad dreams." But then one night, Bao, the younger brother, walked past the altar and stopped. The doll had changed. The blank wooden face now had lips, pale, thin, carved into a smile. Her hair had grown longer, and her fingers, they were stained red. The jar beside her trembled, and somewhere in the distance, The sound of laughter echoed through the mist. But no one was laughing. Not anymore. The doll was never meant to change. That's what Ling's mother told herself as she brushed its hair, now longer, blacker, too soft to be made of carved fiber. It sat on the altar table beside sticks of incense that burned down too fast. The red silk of its dress never gathered dust. Its wooden hands, once stiff and smooth, now curled slightly inward like real fingers resting after prayer. And every night, its head tilted just a little more toward the jar. The jar remained sealed, but something in it pulsed. The family tried not to speak of it, not after what happened to Uncle Thien, not after Mai stopped coming to the house altogether, claiming she had become sensitive to incense smoke. Bao was the only one who dared linger. He was 19, sharp-eyed, skeptical. Where others clung to belief, he chased logic. He watched the doll from the hallway, never too close, but never far enough to look away. What disturbed him most wasn't the changes in the doll. It was the sound. Soft, barely audible, like teeth clicking, like something inside the jar was chewing. The house had grown colder since the ritual. Candles flickered without wind. Shadows clung to corners like stains. The photo of Ling on the family altar began to blur at the edges, her face slowly fading as if waterlogged. Then came the dream. Bao awoke one night with the taste of blood in his mouth and the sense that someone had been pressing down on his chest. He couldn't move, couldn't scream. His mouth was dry, lips cracked, and his gums ached. When he finally forced himself up, he stumbled to the mirror and opened his mouth. A premolar was gone. No blood, no pain, just gone. And in the silence of the room, he swore he heard something whisper his name. Bao. He turned toward the altar. The doll stared directly at him, no longer blank-faced. Its lips were shaped like Ling's, its cheeks fuller, its head tilted forward in greeting, and at its feet, scattered like rice grains, were 3 small white teeth. He fled. He didn't speak of it to his parents. They had already begun pretending nothing was wrong. Ling's mother hummed lullabies to the doll now, called it Kongai, daughter. She brought it warm towels, whispered to it, brushed its cheeks as if it were still flesh. "She's still with us," she said once, when Bao questioned her. "The marriage worked. She's happy now." But Ling had never liked dolls. Bao remembered that clearly. She used to say their eyes made her feel watched, that they held secrets stitched into their mouths. So why would she become one? And more importantly, who was in the jar? He went to the Taoist priest. It wasn't easy to find him again. The man left no address, only a folded prayer slip hidden beneath the wax seal of the jar. Bao burned the slip and buried the ash under moonlight as instructed. 3 days later, a crow arrived at his window with a red thread tied to its leg. The priest appeared that night in the woods behind the house. He looked older now. His robes were dirtier, his nails too long, too yellow. He did not bow. "You broke the silence," he said, not unkindly. Bao asked about the jar, about the doll, about the teeth. The priest sighed. He removed a scroll from his sleeve and handed it to Bao. The paper crackled like old bone. "What your family performed was a ghost marriage, common enough in forgotten places. The soul of the dead is tethered to a physical form, a doll, a tablet, sometimes even another body. But the marriage must be balanced, yin to yin, spirit to spirit." "And the jar?" Bao asked. The priest hesitated. "That jar is not a groom. It is a prison." He explained that long ago, Deep in the border jungles, a Taoist sorcerer had sealed malevolent spirits inside clay vessels, each marked with a symbol of what the spirit consumed. The jar in our home bore the mark of teeth. Ngachtran, the tooth eater, a spirit who cannot speak, only chew. It feeds on memory through the teeth of the living. The sorcerer who trapped it was Ling's ancestor. Bao's mouth dried. "You're saying this thing is part of our bloodline?" The priest nodded. "The curse was buried generations ago, until someone close to the girl, found the jar and brought it back." Mai. Of course it was Mai. Bao remembered now, the way she had handed the wrapped cloth to our mother, her face pale but her eyes too steady. She had visited the jungle shrine weeks before Ling's death, collecting roots for a class project. She had always been jealous of Ling's engagement, of her happiness. But this was beyond spite. This was betrayal woven into bone. "Why would she do this?" Bao asked aloud. The priest only murmured, "Jealousy doesn't need reason. It only needs a moment." Back at the house, Bao approached the altar. The doll's hands were now folded in its lap, fingers interlocked like a bride awaiting her groom. Its mouth had opened slightly. Inside were not carved teeth, but real ones, tiny, human. He stared at the jar. The wax seal pulsed like something breathing beneath it. He didn't touch it. He knew better now. Instead, he whispered to the air, "Ling, are you in there? Can you hear me?" Silence. Then, a faint giggle, high-pitched, childlike, and the sound of something crunching. He turned. The candle had gone out. The doll's head had tilted farther, nearly touching its own shoulder. That night he searched his room 3 times before sleep. He placed salt beneath his pillow, bit into each tooth to make sure they were real. But sleep came, and with it, the dream. Ling stood at the edge of the lotus pond, dressed in red, her hair soaked, her face pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but teeth began to fall out, one by one, bouncing off her lips into the water. Behind her, something rose, tall, faceless, a body wrapped in red string and broken prayer slips. It held a sack of teeth and reached for Bao. He screamed awake. And this time, 2 teeth were missing. The villagers began whispering. At first, just old women with hunched backs and cloudy eyes, muttering into their tea as incense swirled around their ankles. Then, younger voices joined, fathers noticing their sons losing teeth with no cause, children waking from dreams they couldn't remember, blood on their pillows, words missing from their tongues. The school teacher forgot the alphabet. The rice vendor no longer recognized his wife's face. The weaver who had sewn Ling's wedding veil bit into a boiled egg one morning and screamed, 3 teeth lodged inside the yolk. 1 tooth each night, always the same. No pain, no sound, just absence. And the memories began to follow. The woman who lost her husband years ago forgot she had ever been married. A boy forgot his sister's name. People began forgetting birthdays, directions, prayers. The villagers started carrying notes in their pockets, writing down names, numbers, street turns. But no one spoke the name Ling. No one dared. Bao did, alone. He kept a notebook under his pillow, now half filled with observations. The pattern was clear. Anyone who had ever loved Ling, anyone who had mourned her, was losing their teeth, slowly, night after night, as if grief itself were being devoured. And the doll, it grew beautiful. Its wooden frame had taken on color, rosy cheeks, soft skin. Its arms flexed now, hands curling as if reaching. It no longer sat still. Sometimes Bao would pass the altar and find it lying on its side, or with its head turned toward the window. Its wedding dress shimmered as if polished each night by unseen hands. The wax on the jar had begun to crack. Hairline fractures spidered across the seal. The symbols etched into the clay, once faint, now glowed faintly under candlelight, red like fresh blood. Bao's mother saw none of it, or rather, she refused to. She sat with the doll each morning, brushing its hair, humming songs only Ling used to sing. When Bao confronted her, she smiled too gently. "She's happy," she whispered. "She doesn't cry anymore." "That's not Ling," he said. "Then why do I feel her heartbeat when I hold the doll?" she asked, voice trembling. "Why does it smell like her perfume when I pray?" Bao didn't answer. He couldn't, because he had smelled it too. And sometimes, when he was near the altar, he swore he could feel someone breathing beside him. He began to watch the jar each night, sitting across the room, wrapped in blankets, blade in hand. He never touched it, but he watched. And once, just before dawn, he saw something. The wax seal pulsed, a long, slow inhale, like clay stretching, softening, and then movement. Not from the jar, from the doll. Its fingers twitched, and it smiled, a full human smile with teeth. He recognized it. His own teeth. He leapt up, heart pounding. The doll remained still, serene, its head tilted, eyes half-lidded as if amused. He ran outside, breath fogging in the cold. The mist that night was thicker than usual, heavy, wet. It clung to his skin and smelled of lotus roots and old blood. And in the mist, he saw them. Figures, dozens, silent, pale. Men, women, children. Each with wide-open mouths. Each with no teeth. They stood in the rice field, unmoving, their hollow gums bleeding black. Then they began to hum, a low warbling sound like bees caught in glass. He backed away. The field vanished, just mist again. He told himself it was a dream, but when he returned home, his mother was weeping. She held the doll like a child and rocked it gently. "She cried last night," she said. "She missed you." That morning, Bao opened his notebook and froze. Entire pages were gone, torn out. Only one note remained, scribbled in shaking hand. "I dreamt she fed me a spoonful of broken porcelain." The family cat disappeared that day. They found its body behind the altar, its jaw dislocated, tongue missing. No signs of attack, no blood, just removed. The doll had a new necklace, a collar made of tiny vertebrae and teeth. The next day, Bao went to the shrine in the forest, the same shrine where Mai had claimed to find the jar. It was old, abandoned, overgrown with vines and rot. The stone statues were headless, their necks charred. Talismans flapped weakly from broken beams, their ink faded, prayers unraveling. But the altar inside was intact and covered in jars, dozens of them, all sealed, all etched with symbols. He felt them before he saw them, a buzzing, like voices humming just beneath the world, as if the clay itself remembered the souls within. He found one jar shattered, its wax seal torn, shards strewn like teeth across the floor, and in the center, burned into the altar, was a name, Ling. That name should never have been here. This shrine predated Ling by generations, unless the spirit inside the jar wasn't Ling at all, unless someone had given it the name. He remembered the priest's words. The curse runs through your blood. One daughter every generation must be bound to the dead. Was Ling the chosen one, or was she offered? The thought struck him like thunder. Someone knew. Someone had planned this. Not his parents, but someone close. Someone who had fed the jar. She hadn't returned to the house since the ritual, hadn't lit incense, hadn't wept. Bao left the shrine with one shard of the broken jar wrapped in cloth. That night he placed it beside the altar. The doll stared at it and smiled wider. The next morning, his mother had no teeth. Bao no longer dreamed in silence. Every night, he was visited by visions that didn't feel like dreams at all, more like memories that didn't belong to him. He saw hands carving symbols into wet clay, fingers trembling as wax seals were melted with trembling breath. He saw teeth, rows and rows plucked from mouths both young and old, dropped into bowls, ground into powder, and stirred into ink. Each morning, he woke with clay beneath his nails. And more of the village forgot. Mrs. Lon, the herbalist, forgot how to make tea, her mouth full of blood and sorrow. The school children stopped speaking altogether, biting their tongues until they bled, afraid of losing their last remaining teeth. But the doll thrived. Its eyes were now open, glass orbs the color of pond water. Its arms had grown longer, its skin smooth as porcelain. When Bao walked past it, he felt warmth, as if something within was alive, waiting, watching. And the jar was humming. Faint but constant, a low vibration that resonated with bone, not ear. It sat beside the doll as always, still sealed, still marked with the symbol of teeth. But now Bao noticed something new. Underneath the wax, barely visible, were lines carved into the base of the jar. An inscription. Words he could not read, but had seen once before. He returned to the Taoist priest. He found the old man living in a crumbling hut built around a banyan tree where bats slept upside down above the doorway and bones hung from red cords as wind chimes. The priest was sick now, his voice thinner, his eyes clouded with age. "The seal has begun to fail," the priest rasped when Bao entered. "I warned you. Ghost marriages must never bind the living to the hungry." Bao didn't waste time. He unwrapped the shard from the broken jar he found in the shrine. He said, "There are more, many more, but only one was shattered, the one with Lin's name." The priest stared at it for a long time. Then he stood, moved to a dusty scroll case, and pulled out a piece of yellowed parchment. He laid it beside the shard. The symbols matched. These jars were not made to preserve souls. They were made to trap them. He listened as the old man told him the truth. Generations ago, during the late Nguyen dynasty, There lived a Taoist sorcerer in the borderlands, Bao's great-great-grandfather, a master of Faptut Gochwin, ancestral spirit-binding magic. He was revered for his ability to exorcise wandering souls. But not all the spirits he captured were banished. Some were stored. The old man told him he believed that no spirit should be destroyed, only repurposed. And so he began sealing them into clay jars molded under blood moons, each one bearing a sigil carved with powdered teeth, the part of the body said to hold memory, identity, and life essence. But one spirit resisted, a cursed entity born of betrayal and rage, a woman who died with her teeth crushed under her own grief. She became the Ngaswa Rang, the Tooth Eater. She was not a demon. She was a woman sacrificed, a woman who had been promised marriage, then cast aside. Her rage festered beyond death. She wandered from village to village, biting out the teeth of newborns, chewing the names off ancestral tablets, erasing the memory of anyone who loved and left. And when the sorcerer captured her, she whispered only one thing: "Let me marry, or I will never stop eating." He trapped her inside a jar, sealed with 13 children's teeth and a prayer written in blood, and he buried it under a shrine in the forest. A secret passed down only through his line, Bao's line. But someone, the priest said, dug it up, and someone else performed the ritual, placing your sister, Lin, in proximity with the spirit who had no name, no face, only hunger. "My," Bao growled, "she gave us the jar." Then she fed the eater a name, and the eater became your sister. Bao's hands trembled. "So, is Lin gone?" The priest looked at him. "Her soul may still be inside the doll, but the body is no longer hers. It has become a vessel, a bride, and the groom is eating everything she once loved." Bao left the hut in silence. The air felt heavier now, thicker, and in the distance he swore he heard a voice echo from the trees, "Bring me more teeth." That night he returned home to find the house colder than ever. His mother no longer spoke. She sat by the altar, humming tunelessly, her mouth sewn shut with red thread, not by anyone's hands, by her own. A sewing needle still lay beside her. The doll sat on the altar in a new pose, arms wide open, as if welcoming something. The jar beside it now glowed faintly. Cracks spread like veins across its surface. From the corner of his eye he saw something move, not in the room, but in the mirror. A reflection that didn't match. The doll smiled in the glass, moved its head, but in reality, it had not shifted. He covered the mirror and whispered his sister's name. "Lin, if you're still in there, I'm going to fix this." No answer, but the candle flickered. The wax seal on the jar dripped, one thick drop, red as blood. And Bao knew what he had to do. He would confront Mai, not with anger, not with grief, with truth. Because the spirit had been fed false love, and to end a cursed marriage, the betrayal had to be faced by both brides. There was a time when Lin's face smiled only in photographs, shy, serene, the way a girl smiles when she's caught between childhood and a life just beginning. Now, her smile was a patchwork of stolen teeth. Bao saw it first when he lit the altar candle that morning. The doll had changed again, its lips pulled back slightly, revealing not wooden carvings, but real teeth. Different shapes, different sizes, not her own. Each day, a new one appeared. He counted them. 8 now. Some were jagged, some small and milk-white. One still had a silver filling. They were not Lin's. They were the villagers. And she, no, it, was smiling with their mouths. His mother no longer left her room. She had become like a shadow. Mouth sealed shut by red thread, she now slept curled beside the doll, humming lullabies through her nose. Her eyes no longer blinked when Bao spoke. She didn't see the doll as a monster. She saw her daughter. Bao wasn't sure which was worse. He stood at the threshold of her room, holding the broken shard of the old jar in one hand and his notebook in the other. Pages were still missing, torn, erased, rewritten in handwriting that wasn't his. He flipped to the latest note. It read, "She doesn't want me to remember, so she eats the names I speak." He slammed the book shut, then turned and walked out. He needed answers. He needed Mai. He found her at the edge of the hamlet, living in a crumbling stilt house that once belonged to her grandmother. The air around it felt wrong. Not cold, not hot, just still, like breath held too long. Red paper seals hung from the rafters, faded and torn, fluttering despite no wind. Mai answered the door with a pale face and trembling hands. "You shouldn't have come," she said. Bao pushed past her. Inside, the house smelled of burnt hair and old blood. A line of broken dolls hung from the ceiling by strings, mouths sewn shut, eyes scratched out. Salt lines had been drawn on the floor in crumbling circles. "You knew," Bao said. "You gave us that jar. You brought this to our home." Mai didn't deny it. She sat across from him, trembling, but her voice was steady. "I didn't know what it was. Not fully. I wanted her to feel the same fear I did." Bao froze. Fear? Mai looked away. She was going to marry him. Duong, the boy I loved since we were children. She never even asked if I minded. She just smiled and said I'd be her bridesmaid. "So you gave her a cursed jar?" Mai's voice cracked. "I thought it was just a binding charm, something to keep her spirit calm. I didn't know there was a thing inside, not until I saw it smile." "It smiled at you?" Mai nodded. "After the ritual, I went home and dreamed of her, but not Lin, a version of her with 100 mouths, all smiling, all chewing, and every night since I lose more memory. I can't remember my father's face anymore. I think I gave her that too." Bao stared at her. "She's eating our memories through teeth? She's not Lin anymore. She's something wearing her skin." "No," Bao said, "she's both." There was a silence. Then Bao asked the question he had feared most. "Can we undo it?" Mai didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached beneath the altar in her home and pulled out an object Bao hadn't seen in years. Lin's engagement necklace, the one Duong had carved by hand. "It came back to me in a dream, but it was in her mouth." Bao took it, staring. "She's holding on," he whispered. Mai looked up. "Then she needs to be released before the thing inside finishes consuming what's left." That night Bao returned home and found the doll missing from the altar. The candle had been snuffed. The wax on the jar had melted entirely. A trail of small, perfect teeth led down the hallway like breadcrumbs, one every few steps, each gleaming in the moonlight. He followed them. They led to his mother's room. He pushed open the door and froze. The room was dark, but the shape on the floor was unmistakable. The doll. Its limbs splayed, its hair long, wet, twisted like seaweed. its mouth stretched unnaturally wide, grinning from cheek to cheek. And beside it, his mother, sleeping soundlessly, her chest barely rising. He stepped closer, the doll's mouth opened wider. Inside, layered, in rows like shark's teeth, were dozens now. Not 8, not 10, dozens. Some still bleeding, and among them, glinting faintly, was something gold. His mother's tooth, the one she lost when he was 12. She had once told him to keep it in a jar, for luck. Now it was here, in this jar. He fell to his knees and screamed, not from fear but fury. "You don't get to keep her," he whispered. The doll blinked. Its glass eyes reflected candlelight that wasn't there, and it spoke, not aloud, inside his head. "I only take what you give me." "Then take me," Bao snarled. "Leave her alone." The doll tilted its head and smiled again, with every mouth it had ever stolen. Before the altar, before the jar, before the doll's teeth had names, there had been only 2 girls under one sky, Lin and Mai. They were born a month apart, raised side by side like twin stars orbiting the same sorrowful moon. In Mang Gui Hamlet, friendships were rare and sacred, forged in silence and shadow, sealed with red thread and pinky promises never to speak of ghosts aloud. But every friendship carries its own cracks, and some grow teeth. It began with a boy, Dun, quiet, gentle, the kind of boy who carved wood instead of speaking too much, who made small animals from banana leaves and left them on doorsteps for no reason. Both girls had noticed him. Both had smiled. But he only ever smiled back at Lin. Mai had swallowed it at first, smiled wider, even helped Lin write letters to him, giggled when Lin asked what to wear, pretended it didn't matter when the wedding was arranged. "He's not mine to lose," she had told herself. But at night, she watched Lin sleeping beside her and imagined her teeth cracking under the pressure of unspoken things. Then came the shrine. Mai had wandered there alone during the summer rains, searching for medicinal roots, or so she claimed. The truth was stranger. She had found the path in a dream. Each night, the same voice had called to her, guiding her through thick vines and broken gates until she found the ruined altar beneath the banyan trees. There she uncovered the jar. It was half buried, crusted in wax, marked with symbols she didn't understand. But when she touched it, something pulsed inside, and when she whispered Lin's name to it, it vibrated like a heartbeat. "Do you want him to remember only you?" the voice had asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. On the day Lin drowned, Mai stood beside the pond, unseen. She had watched Lin walk into the water, not resisting, eyes wide with something between sleep and surrender. Not fear, not pain, just stillness, like a bride walking down the aisle. Mai had waited for Lin to turn, to scream, to fight, but she never did. The ripples were gentle when she disappeared, and Mai, clutching the jar wrapped in yellow cloth, turned away before the silence could echo. She hadn't known what would happen, not fully. The man she gave the jar to, the Taoist, had looked at her for too long, had paused as he took the relic, as if weighing a curse with one hand and a prayer in the other. "This is not a vessel for peace," he had warned. She deserves closure. It's what her mother wants. And what do you want? Mai hadn't answered, because the truth was unspeakable. She didn't want Lin back. She just didn't want to be forgotten. Now, weeks later, Mai sat alone in her crumbling house, her hands stained with salt and soot, her mouth dry from prayers that no longer worked. She had written Lin's name on her walls, her skin, her floors, but the ink faded overnight. The letters peeled off, and when she looked in the mirror, her reflection lagged, smiling when she did not. She had tried to burn the dolls, to break the teeth strung above her bed, but each time they returned, reassembled by morning, hanging like accusations. The night before Bao came, she dreamed of the doll. It sat at the center of her room, dressed in red, holding a mirror in one hand and a cracked photo in the other. In the photo, Mai was alone at Lin's wedding. Everyone else had no face. The doll had whispered, "Do you regret it, or you only regret being caught?" She didn't answer. She never did. When Bao arrived, she almost didn't let him in, but guilt has its own hunger, and it eats more slowly than grief. She told him everything. The dream path, the jar, the day by the pond. She didn't scream, she didn't fight it, Mai said, her voice shaking. Because something had already entered her, Bao said, hollow-eyed. Mai nodded, silently weeping. I thought if I gave the jar a name, it would become that name, that maybe I could bury her memory, that maybe Dune would forget her too. But you gave the wrong name, Bao whispered. You fed a curse. And now, it remembers all of us. Later, after Bao left, Mai lit 3 candles and placed her palms on the floorboards. Lin, I'm sorry, she whispered. The wind did not blow, the room did not shift, but from beneath her bed, the sound of chewing began, slow, wet, rhythmic. And then a voice in her ear, not Lin's, older, hungrier. 1 friend, 1 tooth. She woke the next morning, missing a molar, and a photo of Lin was gone from her wall, replaced by a drawing of herself with her mouth sewn shut. The path to the old jungle shrine was not marked by signs, it was marked by silence. No bird song, no cicadas, only the steady drip of water onto moss-covered stone and the brittle sound of red talismans crumbling beneath Bao's feet. The forest seemed to lean inward the deeper he went, branches arching overhead like ribs, canopy thick enough to block the sun. He carried nothing but a lantern, a crow feather wrapped in red string, and the shard of the broken jar in his coat pocket. And in his mind, one name repeated like a chant, Ling, Ling, Ling. But even that felt like a word eaten hollow. By now, he barely remembered her voice, only her smile. The real one, not the one the doll wore. The shrine appeared suddenly, as if birthed from the mist, ruined, overgrown, but still standing. The stone steps were cracked and half swallowed by earth, but the ancestral gate remained, its wood blackened by fire, its roof lined with bone fragments from animals too small to name. Bao stepped beneath it. The temperature dropped. Inside the shrine was an altar of rotting wood, covered in roped-off circles drawn in old blood and ash. And lined across the far wall, rows upon rows of clay jars, each one sealed in wax, each one marked with a symbol. He moved closer, lantern shaking in his hand. Symbols of hands, tongues, eyes, bones, hearts, each representing what the spirit inside devoured. And there, in the back, was an empty pedestal, dustless, recently disturbed. Above it, carved into the wall, the symbol of a tooth, cracked. This was hers, the jar Mai had stolen, the one given Ling's name. Bao stepped forward, scanning the other jars. He found one that had fractured down the middle, sealed again in a clumsy patchwork of wax and red thread. This one had no visible mark, no symbol on the outside. But it whispered, a voice so faint it made his vision blur. "I remember. I remember." He turned, startled. The whisper came from behind, but there was no one. He stared back at the jars and then noticed something worse. Each one had a small slot carved in its base, barely wide enough for a finger or a tooth. And beneath each jar, arranged neatly like shrine offerings, were piles of teeth. Dozens, hundreds, old, cracked, yellow, some baby teeth, some gold-capped, some still stained with blood. Each jar fed by forgotten mouths. Bao knelt beside one, hand trembling, and lifted a canine tooth no bigger than a grain of rice. It felt warm in his palm, like it still remembered chewing, smiling, weeping. He whispered again, "Ling," and the jars replied, not with speech, but with motion. They vibrated. Not all, just a few, the ones nearest him. He backed away. Then, crack! One jar shattered. Not from touch, not from impact, from within. Clay split, wax hissed, and something spilled out. Not a spirit, not a scream, but names. Etched into the inside of the clay in rows, over and over, every name worn smooth as if licked for centuries. Bao stepped closer and saw hers, Ling. It wasn't just on one jar. It was on 7, the name repeated, overlapping, interwoven with symbols. Her name had been used more than once. Bao breathed. She was already chosen. A cold breeze crawled up his neck. He turned to find a mirror, long cracked, fogged with age, leaning against the shrine's back wall. He wiped the glass and saw her. Not the doll, not the girl, but a version of Ling suspended in black water, mouth open, eyes stitched, reaching forward with hands too long for her arms. Then the reflection moved. The mirror shattered, the wind stopped, and the jars went still. But he didn't leave. He sat there in the ruins until nightfall, piecing together what he could. The jars were prisons, the symbols labels, the teeth offerings. The spirits inside were bound to memory. If you forgot them, they withered. If you remembered them, they fed. If you loved them, they claimed you. And someone, long ago, had loved Ling too much. Enough to name her again and again. Enough to marry her to a hunger. As Bao stood to leave, he turned once more to the altar and bowed low. Then, without ceremony, he took a tooth from each pile, one from every jar with her name, and dropped them into a leather pouch. The teeth clinked together like dice. As he passed under the broken gate, he felt the gaze of something ancient on his back. Not malice, not rage, but expectation. The kind that waits in the dark for someone to open their mouth, so it can take what it's owed. When he returned to the village, the streets were empty, but every doorstep had a single tooth placed on it, and in the mist above the rooftops, he heard the doll's laughter echo, soft, sweet, and layered with every voice it had ever stolen. The house no longer creaked at night. It breathed. Each room held its own rhythm, timid exhalations that puffed out the incense, swelled the curtains, bent the candle flames like a slow heartbeat. Bao noticed it first when the air stopped being still and started being aware. The walls listened, the floorboards remembered, and the doll whispered. Not always aloud. Often it was just the echo of a word that hadn't been spoken, a breath that didn't belong, a phrase that came into your mind without ever passing through your ears. Open your mouth. Bring her back to me. She misses the ones who weep. The doll now sat at the center of the house, no longer confined to the altar. It had moved, or rather, it had been moved by unseen hands, or perhaps by those too bewitched to notice their own betrayal. Bao's mother, now completely silent, had made it a throne, a raised platform of pillows and folded robes, layered with wedding cloths and perfumed veils. The air around it always smelled sweet, like jasmine rotting in stagnant water. And the jar? It was gone. Not missing, absorbed. Melted wax seeped into the doll's wooden joints. The carved teeth symbols had etched themselves into the underside of its porcelain chin. Its fingertips were blackened with soot, like they'd been dipped in ink or ash. And its mouth, always open now, always smiling, always full. With each day, more villagers forgot. Old Mr. Kai walked into the woods one morning and never came back, leaving behind only a note with his name scrawled over and over, until the ink turned into a row of teeth drawn in a child's hand. The children in the hamlet no longer played. They sat in silence, humming low lullabies with missing verses, as if the melody had been chewed away. Bao watched it all in a haze. He no longer knew how long he'd been awake. He didn't trust sleep. It was when the whispering was loudest. But when he did dream, he dreamt in red. A red veil pulled across his face, a red thread tying his tongue, a red mouth whispering truths in a voice that was no longer Lin's and yet pretended to be. "I don't want to be forgotten," she said one night in his dream. "Ah, you're not forgotten," he whispered back. "But they keep trying to erase me." He saw her then, standing beneath the lotus trees, wedding dress soaked, her face fading like an unfinished painting. "Do you remember my laughter?" she asked. I nodded. "Then give me your teeth." He woke up with blood on his tongue, and a note on his chest, not handwritten, but sewn into a scrap of wedding silk. One tooth for one memory. He sought the priest again. This time, the old man greeted him with incense smoke already burning, as if he'd been expecting Bao to come. "You've heard her, haven't you?" the priest asked, his eyes almost blind now. "She speaks through the doll, through dreams, through breath." "No, not her," the priest corrected. "The one inside her, the eater, the spirit you fed with your sister's name." He handed him a folded scroll, smaller than the rest, bound in black thread. "This is the ritual to sever the marriage." Bao's heart quickened. "Tell me what it needs." 3 offerings, a betrayal reclaimed, a mouth silenced, and a memory returned. Bao frowned. "I don't understand." "You will," he whispered, "when the doll demands them." He returned home that night to find the house entirely dark. No lamps, no moonlight, only the glow from the doll itself, seated in its makeshift throne like a bride awaiting the ceremony. Its face was almost human now, too human. Lifelike skin stretched over wood, eyes wet with lacquer, and when it blinked, the motion was slow, deliberate, as if it wanted him to see. "You brought me back," it whispered. Bao froze. "Lin?" The doll smiled wider. "Isn't that what you wanted? You're not her." It tilted its head. "Not only her." "Then who else?" The doll blinked, and then it began to speak not in one voice, but many, layered, discordant, male, female, child, elder, all whispering over each other like leaves rustling beneath ash. "I am every name that was ever forgotten, every lover left behind, every vow broken beneath the veil. I am the silence between prayers, the scream behind the wedding flute. I am hunger dressed as remembrance." The room shook. Bao's mouth drew dry. The doll raised its hand, and from its sleeve, teeth fell. A cascade of them, clattering against the floor, rolling toward him like dice from a ritual game. "Choose one, and I will return what you've lost." "I don't want what you stole." "Then give me more." "No." "Give me her friend, the one who betrayed her. Give me my." Bao stepped back. The doll's smile cracked wider. "She's already half mine." "Then take me instead." The candlelight shifted. The air grew cold. The doll stood. It had never stood before, and now it was taller than him. Not by height, but presence. It loomed. "Would you wear her grief like a wedding robe, if it frees her soul?" asked Bao. "If it frees her soul, then yes." "Then bring me the needle." "What needle?" "The one to sew your mouth shut." Bao's vision blurred. He saw himself with red thread tying his lips, blood running down his chin, holding Lin's name in his mouth like a secret never spoken aloud. He collapsed to his knees. The doll stepped forward. "One tooth at a time, until you forget why you loved her." In the morning, he awoke with a single tooth missing, and the scroll still clutched in his hand. Its wax seal broken. The ritual had begun. The scroll felt heavier than its size should allow, as if the weight of every forgotten soul, bound by its instructions, pressed against the rice paper, humming in silence. Bao held it carefully, even though his hands trembled. He had broken the wax seal in his sleep, unknowingly accepting the contract. There was no turning back now. The candlelight barely touched the symbols inked across the parchment. They were not letters, not exactly. They were wounds, dark strokes that bled into one another, forming patterns that shifted when he blinked. Some resembled teeth, others looked like open mouths. In the center of the scroll, a red circle had been drawn by hand, not with ink, with blood. Inside it were 4 characters, 4 instructions. The first offering, betrayal reclaimed. The second offering, a mouth silenced. The third offering, a memory returned. The final vow, the groom must bleed. Bao exhaled slowly. His chest felt tight. There was no explanation beneath the lines, no guidance. Only the priest's cryptic warning echoed in his mind. You will understand when the doll demands them. He stared longer. The words began to shift, as if the scroll was thinking, as if the ritual was alive, and slowly, meaning revealed itself. 1. Betrayal reclaimed. To break a cursed marriage born of betrayal, the betrayal must be unearthed and given back to the one who refused to face it. There was only one betrayal here. Mai. Her jealousy had fed the jar. Her silence had sealed the spirit within Lin. But it wasn't enough to blame her. The ritual demanded more. The betrayer must confess and willingly offer what she took. She must admit she wanted Lin replaced, and she must give up the love she stole. Mai would have to face Lin, not the doll, the spirit, the girl she damned, if she survived. 2. A mouth silenced. Bao stared at this line for a long time. His mother's mouth had been sewn shut. Was that enough? No. The scroll pulsed in his hand. Not forced, willingly. Someone had to willingly sew their own mouth closed, binding their voice, silencing their right to speak, to mirror the ghost bride's suffering, to know what it meant to be voiceless at the altar, to honor the vow that was stolen. Bao's throat closed. Could it be his? Would he have to silence himself? For Lin? The scroll did not answer. 3. A memory returned. This line ached the most because Bao already knew which memory the spirit wanted back. Lin's, the real Lin, before the jar, before the hunger, before her laughter was eaten and worn like a mask. Someone who remembers her must give that memory back. To give it back meant to let it go, to forget her willingly, to erase the only piece of her left untouched by the curse, a sacrifice worse than death. Because how do you let go of someone you're still trying to save? 4. The final vow. The groom must bleed. This line was written darker than the rest, as if pressed harder into the page. Bao stared at it confused. Who was the groom? Lin had been married to the sealed spirit, but the doll had begun calling him that name. You brought me back, it had whispered. You will finish what she could not. It all clicked. He was the groom now. By speaking to her, by offering himself, by refusing to let her go, he had stepped into the role. And the ritual demanded blood. Not death, blood. From the groom's mouth, cut from his own tongue, to bind the spell, to separate the spirit from Lin, to sever the marriage. But the scroll was not finished. Beneath the 4 vows, new words appeared, inked in pain. If any offering is unwilling, then the bride will take everything. The lantern flickered. A cold wind swept through the room, though the windows were closed. The scroll trembled in his hands, and then it spoke, not in his mind, out loud. A voice older than language, layered like overlapping screams buried underwater. The bride waits in red, and the betrayer carries her ring. Bring them both, or the village will be buried without names. The scroll went silent. The air went still, and footsteps creaked outside his door. Slow, dragging. He turned, blood freezing in his veins. Someone stood in the hallway, bare feet, wet with pond water, a bridal veil trailing across the floor like a bleeding shadow. The doll. No, Lin. No. Both. It stepped into the light. Its face was nearly perfect now, almost human, almost beautiful, except for the mouth. Too wide, too full, too hungry. It smiled and opened its hand. In its palm rested two small objects, a sewing needle and red thread. "It is time," the doll whispered with Lin's voice, soft and sweet and dead. "Begin the ritual, my groom." Bao looked down at the scroll. The first line burned like a command. Betrayal reclaimed. He would need he would need courage. And before it was over, he would need to bleed. The thread pulled tight, one stitch at a time. Red across lips, needle through skin. Mai didn't scream, didn't sob. She had known, even before Bao showed her the scroll, that this was where her path led. When he arrived at her house, pale, trembling, scroll in hand, she had already been waiting. A bowl of salt at her feet, her wrists tied loosely with white ribbon, not to bind, but to remind. Her room had been scrubbed clean, every doll burned, every jar shattered, except one, the jar she had first unearthed. She kept it on her lap, like a sick child. "She visits me now," Mai said, voice empty. "Not just in dreams. She stands at the edge of the room, every night, smiling with my mother's teeth." "Then it's time," Bao replied and unrolled the scroll. He read the 4 offerings aloud. Mai didn't flinch. When he reached the first, betrayal reclaimed, she simply nodded. "I'll do it," she said. "But she won't accept an apology. She wants a confession." "Then give it to her," Bao said. "Face her. Tell her the truth." They performed the ritual in the ruined lotus field, where Lin had died. The village had stopped coming here. Grass grew wild, water stagnant, flower stems blackened like bones. Bao drew the circle in salt. Mai stepped inside it barefoot, carrying a candle and the jar. The moment she lit the flame, the air turned cold, and Lin arrived. Not the doll, her, what was left of her. She walked across the water in silence, veil dragging through the mud. Her dress no longer flowed, it clung, soaked with rot. Her face shifted as she approached, sometimes Lin, sometimes not. "You brought me the wrong gift," the spirit said in Lin's voice, but through other mouths. Mai held her ground. "No," she whispered, "I brought myself." The lotus pond hissed. Water rippled. Lin's veil lifted without wind. Underneath, her eyes were gone, replaced by empty sockets filled with teeth. "You gave me his name. Now give me his memory." Mai stepped closer and fell to her knees. "I give you mine." She placed her hand over her heart and ripped out the necklace Duong had once given her, not with fingers, with memory. She closed her eyes, let the image of his face fade, the way he looked when he carved talismans, the scent of bamboo when he laughed, the smile he gave her only once and never again. All of it gone. And then she opened her eyes. The spirit blinked,
and vanished. The salt circle scattered, the pond went still, and the air smelled of lilies again. The first offering was complete, but the spirit was not finished with her. That night, Mai received a visitor, the doll. It walked through her house like a bride through a temple, silent, reverent, expectant. It carried nothing, but its smile said everything. It wanted her mouth. "I gave you my love. Now give me your silence." Mai nodded. She didn't scream as she threaded the needle. She didn't cry as she pushed it through her lips, one stitch, then another, until her mouth was sealed, the red thread tight across her teeth. Blood soaked her chin. The doll watched, approved, and left. Mai curled into her bed and wept through her nose, tears soaking the pillow. But for the first time in weeks, she dreamed of nothing. Peace, however brief. Bao watched it all, from the shadows. He wanted to help, to stop it, but he knew that if he intervened, the ritual would fail. It had to be willing. The second offering was complete, but the hardest remained. The next morning, Bao returned to the house. His mother was still in her room, unmoving. The doll sat at her feet, fingers twitching, lips whispering without voice. When Bao stepped inside, the candle lit by itself, the scroll unfurled, and the third vow began to burn. A memory returned. Bao didn't need to ask what memory. He had been clinging to it for weeks. The last real moment with Lin, the one where she laughed, the one before the jar, before the water, before the curse. He still remembered the scent of her hair when she hugged him goodbye, the exact shade of the sky that afternoon, the sound of her voice as she called him little brother for the last time. He had written it in his notebook, held on to it like a lifeline. But now, the scroll demanded he let it go. Not just forget, give it back. Bao walked to the altar, opened his notebook, and tore the page out. The candle flame reached forward, impossible, unnatural, and consumed it whole. The memory left his mind like air from a lung. Suddenly, he couldn't recall the color of her hair, the sound of her laugh, her face. Gone. It hurt, like amputation of the soul. But it was done. The third vow complete, and the scroll glowed gold. Only one vow remained, the final one. The groom must bleed. Bao didn't hesitate. He reached for the same needle Mai had used, dipped it in salt, and placed it on his tongue. He whispered Lin's name and bit down. Blood filled his mouth. The scroll burst into flame, and the doll screamed. And then, everything went black.
At first, Bao thought he had gone blind. When he awoke, the world was pale, colors muted, sounds distant, time slow, like breath held too long. His mouth ached, tongue torn. He tasted salt and iron and memory and silence. So much silence, the kind that hums beneath your skin. He sat up. The scroll was gone. Only ashes remained, arranged in the shape of a broken tooth. The doll was no longer in the house. Neither was his mother. He staggered to the door, vision blurred, head pounding with the ghost of forgotten names. When he opened it, the village stood still under a gray sky. No birds, no wind, no voices. Just homes with open doors and doorsteps littered with teeth, hundreds of them, all pointing inward, all pointing home. The villagers were there, but they weren't. They wandered aimlessly, faces blank with confusion, bumping into walls, forgetting their way inside their own homes. They spoke in fragments. I. Who? Where? My daughter. Her name. Her. Why can't I remember? Bao walked through the hamlet, heart sinking. He recognized every face, but none of them recognized him. They looked through him, like a stranger. Worse, when he passed old friends, they recoiled, not in fear, in confusion. Who are you? Have we met? Do you live here? Their eyes held nothing, their mouths half empty. Some missing teeth, some missing all of them, and their smiles wrong, stretched, absent, vague like old photographs left in the sun too long. As if the curse had scrubbed Ling from their memories, and in doing so had scraped away parts of themselves, because Ling had lived here. She had loved here. She had been woven into the threads of their daily lives, helping grandmothers with rice paper, teaching children how to fold paper boats, hanging lanterns during Tet, singing songs under trees. And now, no one remembered, because they had given their teeth. And in doing so, they had fed the doll too much, and the spirit had done what it always promised to do. If you cannot forget me willingly, I will take the part of you that can. Bao wandered to the lotus pond, the place where it all began. It was dried now. No water, no reflection, just cracked earth and the withered stems of dead flowers. At the center stood a figure, back turned, veil torn. He stepped closer. It was his mother. She turned when she heard his steps, that there was no recognition in her eyes. No fear, no love, just dull confusion. Her lips, once sewn shut, now hung open, threads gone. Her mouth was completely toothless, and she said, "Do I know you?" He fell to his knees, not from pain, from understanding. The ritual had worked. The marriage was broken. The bride had been severed, the spirit cast out. But the cost was remembrance. And now his mother, like the rest of the village, floated in a life without roots. They had erased the curse by erasing the one it clung to. And Ba was the only one left who remembered, because he had not given all of it. He had bled. He had forgotten her laugh, but not her name. Not her. Not completely. Not yet. That night, Bao returned to the shrine. He walked through the empty streets, past open houses and echoing walls. The jars were waiting, still humming, but quieter now. He placed one final offering at the altar. His notebook, the one where he had written Ling's stories. He tore each page slowly, burned them one by one, and with each flame, a whisper echoed through the shrine. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you."
The final voice was hers, soft, sad, grateful. You remembered long enough to let me go. The candle beside him flickered, then went out, and Bao sat in darkness, alone, but at peace. By morning, the village had changed again. The faces were softer. Smiles returned, awkward, toothless, but human. Children began to speak again. The fog lifted, the mist cleared, and the girl in the red wedding dress was never seen again. Not in dreams, not in water, not in memory. Except for Bao, who walked alone, clutching a single tooth in his pocket, the last one he never gave. And some nights, he still whispered her name, even though no one else could remember who she was, even though the wind no longer replied, even though the doll was gone forever.
The mouth is a doorway. That was what the scroll had meant. Not just speech, not just breath, but memory, soul, intention. A mouth can name a spirit. A mouth can betray the dead. A mouth can make a promise or break it. And the curse that began with a name would only truly end when the door was closed for good. Bao had broken the marriage. He had fulfilled 3 offerings, but the final vow, though accepted, was incomplete. The bleeding had begun, but not the sealing. The spirit's hunger was gone from the village, but something still stirred in the bones of the hamlet. Something that had not been buried deep enough. A last whisper, a final bite, the breath of a curse trying to inhale once more. And Bao knew what had to be done. He would seal his mouth forever, not with thread, but with silence so absolute that even his thoughts would forget how to speak. The priest was waiting, old now, fragile. He had moved into the shrine, taking shelter beside the jars as if they were his ancestors. His eyes were all but blind, yet he greeted Bao by name. "You've come to finish it," he said. Bao nodded. "There's still something left, a thread uncut." "Yes," the priest murmured, "and it's not hers." They sat on opposite sides of a salt circle, candlelight between them flickering like the edge of a blade. "You've kept her name," the priest said. "I had to." "No," the old man whispered, "you chose to." "If I forget, she'll disappear completely." "No, if you remember alone, she'll never be free." Bao looked at the pouch in his lap, the final tooth, Ling's, the one from when she chipped it at age 10, biting too hard into a mooncake. She had cried. He had laughed. She had thrown the rest of the pastry at him. He had kept it all these years. The priest held out a ceramic bowl. "Give it up." Bao hesitated. "If I do this—" "You will never say her name again," the priest confirmed. "Not even in thought." "And she'll be gone?" "No," the priest said. "She'll be free." That word was heavier than grief. It was a kind of love Bao didn't know he possessed, the kind that asks nothing in return. He dropped the tooth into the bowl. It cracked once, then turned to dust. The candle sputtered. The priest began to chant, words in a language older than speech, tongueless syllables passed down through bone and ink. He felt it in his skull, a pressure, like something unhooking from behind his eyes. The priest dipped his finger in the ash and pressed it to Bao's lips, then his ears,
then his forehead, and finally, his chest. "Your mouth will forget," the priest whispered, "and so will your heart." Bao opened his mouth to speak, but no words came, not from his throat, not from his mind, not even from memory. He blinked, and the image of Lin faded from behind his eyes. Her laugh, gone. Her name, gone. Her favorite flower, gone. Only a warmth remained, an absence without pain, a silence without ache, like a grave well tended. The ritual was complete, the final vow fulfilled. The jars inside the shrine stopped humming. The doll, long gone from the village, crumbled in some distant corner of the world, its mouth collapsing into dust, its teeth rotting to powder, its red veil finally settling into stillness. And the spirit that had once clawed its way through blood and betrayal vanished, not in violence, in release, like a sigh exhaled after centuries of weeping. Bao no longer speaks. He walks the village with a quiet smile, helping where he's needed. The others still don't remember, but they no longer forget themselves. Their smiles are real, even if they're missing teeth. And some nights Bao kneels in the lotus field, now blooming again, and listens to the wind pass through the reeds. There is no voice there, no ghost, only peace, only silence, and it is enough.
They said the mist had lifted, but Bao knew better. It hadn't vanished. It had only stepped back, waiting, like breath held in the lungs of the mountain. And on the 7th night after the final ritual, as the moon rose round and red, the mist returned, crawling through the trees like silk unraveling, seeping into doorways, curling around lanterns as if remembering where they used to hang. There was no wind, no sound, only the slow unfurling of her veil through the village. The spirit was not back, but the echo of her was. Because no curse dies cleanly. It leaves a stain, a shadow, a silence so heavy it eventually forgets it was once a scream. The villagers felt it first in their bones. Old pains returned, scars itched, teeth ached in empty gums. Some heard knocking at their windows with no one outside. Others dreamed of red dresses hung from trees like mourning banners. And children woke crying, whispering of a woman who smiled too much and asked for their names. They couldn't see her, but they felt her. The spirit was gone, but the memory of her death, her grief, her stolen wedding, it still lingered. Because some vows, once spoken, don't vanish, they echo. And on that final night, they echoed loudest. It began at the altar. The shrine Bao had built for Lin had long been dismantled, but its shape remained in the dust, etched by time and habit. At dusk, the dust trembled, and something rose. Not a doll, not a ghost, a veil. Red, torn, floating in the air without wind. It hovered, waiting, and Bao, mute, solemn, sleepless, stepped into it. Not out of fear, not even love, out of duty. Because it had always been his role to end it, the groom that fate had chosen, the last to remember, the final thread. The moment he stepped beneath the veil, the mist surged through the village. Windows cracked, mirrors shattered, funeral drums sounded in the distance, though no one beat them. And the bride arrived, not in flesh, not in spirit, but in ritual. A storm of red ribbon and mourning incense, a wind that smelled like burnt jasmine and candle wax. She didn't walk, she unfolded, a shadow shaped like Lynn, but taller, broader, her arms stitched with thread pulled from mouths long sealed. She opened her hand and revealed the truth. One last tooth, small, perfect, bloodless, Lynn's, the one Bao thought he had burned. He stepped forward, took it in his palm. It pulsed with memory, not speech, not sorrow, but choice. He understood then. The ritual had not been about forgetting her. It had been about remembering her as she truly was, not as a ghost, not as a bride, not as a doll, but as a girl, a sister, a soul, not bound to a jar, not worn as a mask, but free. Bao walked to the center of the village. The mist parted. The villagers gathered, some toothless, some lost in fog, but they watched, and they listened, as Bao, still voiceless, lifted the tooth to the air and crushed it between his palms. Not in anger, in forgiveness. Ash scattered into the red mist, and the veil fell, softly, quietly, like petals from a dying flower. In the distance, the shrine cracked, the jars crumbled, and the names sealed inside them whispered out into the trees, joining the wind as harmless songs. Not curses, not screams, just songs. Soft lullabies forgotten by time. The bride was gone, this time for good. No thread left to follow, no name left to wear, no teeth left to steal. Only a field of lotus flowers, blooming red in the dark. The villagers woke the next morning with clear eyes and no pain. They didn't remember the night, but they smiled. For the first time in years, the village smelled of rice and smoke and laughter. And in one home, Bao sat alone, tracing the outline of a name he no longer knew on a piece of blank paper. Not to remember, but to honor the forgetting, because now silence meant peace, and the mist had no face left to wear. The curse had no grave. There was no burial mound, no talisman-wrapped stone, no red-threaded effigy hung from a tree. What had happened in Mang Gui Hamlet left no monument, only a silence so deep it rewrote memory. And yet, something remained. Not fear, not pain, but a quiet ache behind the bums, a phantom feeling, like a missing tooth that still throbs when it rains, a space where something used to live, a name, a girl, a story the wind no longer dared whisper. The villagers never spoke of that season. They carry on, planted rice, swept their doorsteps, lit incense, some with empty mouths, others with empty minds. Most had forgotten entirely. They knew something had passed through their village like a fever, but no one could say what. They had teeth missing, sure, but they blamed age, or superstition, or swallowed dreams. They smiled still, some wide, some crooked, but none as wide as hers had been, none so full, and none that smiled in dreams. Only Bao remembered, sort of. He walked the village each morning, helping elders with baskets, teaching children how to fold paper boats, though he never remembered who had taught him. He couldn't speak anymore, not since the seal. His voice had withered with the memory it once carried, but he smiled gently, nodded politely, and listened. He was loved, even if he wasn't understood.
Children asked him to tell stories. He only shook his head and folded cranes from banana leaves. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, he left a flower on the pond's edge, a single red lotus, for someone whose name he didn't remember, but whose absence he still felt in his chest. At night, he dreamed of footsteps, faint, soft, someone dancing barefoot in wet grass, a veil fluttering across a pond. But when he awoke, he never saw her face, and the dreams grew quieter until they stopped coming, and the lotus flowers bloomed on their own. The shrine in the woods is gone now, collapsed under time and rot. The jars crumbled to dust, the altar swallowed by vines. Only one stone remains, half buried in the moss, bearing no writing. But those who pass it feel something stir in their teeth, a tingling, a hollow space, and a warmth that isn't theirs, like someone once whispered a secret through their molars, and they've spent their whole lives trying to remember what it was. Some say ghosts fade when they are forgotten. Others say they're only free when remembered with kindness. Bao no longer wonders which is true, because the bride in red is gone, and the mist, though it returns with every change of season, no longer carries her shadow. Just rain, just wind, just silence. And once a year, on the 7th night of the 7th month, the villagers gather under the banyan tree. They light candles, place bowls of rice beneath the sky, and smile. To honor something. They don't know what or who, but the toothless among them always cry a little harder, as if somewhere deep in their bones a song they once knew tries to hum itself through empty mouths, and for just a moment they remember. Not a name, not a face, just a feeling, the weight of a red veil in fog, the sound of laughter stitched with sorrow, the echo of love that never made it to the altar, and the silence that saved them all.